My dad is the stubborn old man behind Songtao Tea Hut in NYC's Chinatown, clinging to his crack-mended coarse clay cups and cheap tea leaves while the shop loses money every month. I run a craft brewery in Brooklyn, sporting silver-gray short hair, convinced his tea-brewing is a waste of life. To prove myself, I tossed the wet tea dregs he discarded into an Imperial Stout and accidentally brewed a smash hit, Smoked Phoenix. A food vlogger stormed into the tea hut, live streaming trash to gold, and my dad smashed his treasured cup. Months of Cold War later, I received 3 greasy plastic buckets filled with various tea dregs he'd scavenged from street corners. A note was pressed at the bottom: "Tea dregs are still tea." Mass production hit a snag. He saved the flavor by manually stirring a 300-degree industrial dryer. On bottling day, he spat out a taste of the new batch: sour. No backbone. Seal the tanks. I hit the stop button in front of everyone, the brewery's first ever work stoppage order issued for no backbone, no rain smell. The shadow of the Manhattan Bridge's steel cables pressed heavily onto the cramped alley of Doyer Street, like the ribs of a giant beast. Morning light grudgingly squeezed through the narrow window of Songtao Tea Hut, illuminating only the lone, dust-covered maneki-neko on the counter. The air smelled of aged wood, cheap pu'er tea cakes, and the inescapable lingering dampness unique to Chinatown basements. The hunched figure of the proprietor, Bo Nyan Chun, was sunk into the dim yellow glow behind the counter, like an ancient tree root that had claimed its spot for years. His coarse fingers caressed not some precious purple clay, but a thick, rough, deep brown earthenware cup. Its walls bore scars from the kill fire, and a thin silver line of mended rivets along the rim caught a faint glimmer in the gloom. 40 years ago, fresh off the boat in New York, he'd bought it for $5 at a Brooklyn flea market. It was his last tangible link to the tea-drinking customs of a homeland fading from memory. No Tiger Spring water. Tap water, filtered 3 times, churned and screamed in an electric kettle. Bo Nyan Chun scooped out a spoonful of dark, oily Phoenix oolong, not the top grade, but affordable stuff, brought circuitously from San Francisco's Chinatown. Boiling water hit the coarse clay cup, releasing the cheap charcoal, roast aroma mixed with an earthy pungency. This was the meager sanctuary he'd built over 30 years in a foreign land, using the humblest leaves and crudest tools to barely soothe his homesickness. Alexandra Alex Chun shoved the shop door open, bringing in a blast of cold wind from the Hudson and the lingering clamor of Brooklyn craft beer bars. Her sharp, silver, gray crop cut glinted, her ear cartilage piercing a point of cold light. Her gaze swept over her father's hunched back, his profile as he scooped tea leaves from a crumpled foil bag with a plastic spoon, then landed on the dusty card reader in the corner and the long line snaking outside the window for the Bubble Planet boba shop. A familiar irritation, like unfiltered tea dust, clogged her throat. She grabbed a few curled receipts and slapped them onto the peeling, patchy counter. "Pop, look at this!" After rent and utilities last month, we were in the red again. The plastic cups they sell next door in a day could fill this dump 3 times over. Alex's voice, Cantonese accented English, was a rock thrown into stagnant water. "Who has time to sit here listening to you talk about Lord Guan patrolling the city anymore? Time is money, understand?" Chun Bo Nyan didn't even lift an eyelid, as if his daughter's voice were just another siren wailing past outside. He lifted the coarse clay cup, blew away the scum, took a sip, his Adam's apple bobbing. "What's the rush?" His voice was hoarse, thick with Tahitian dialect. "Tea has its taste. People have their paths. Forcing it brings no sweetness." He savored it with such focus, as if it were priceless tribute tea, not bitter, cheap dregs. Watching her father's face yellowed by years of cooking fumes and smoke, that wave of helplessness washed over Alex again. She knew this, Songtao Tea Hut, was her father's root in this foreign soil, the umbilical cord connecting him to a vanishing homeland. But she knew better. In this world ruled by algorithms and influencers, This tea hut was as fragile as the tiny rivet line on the cup's rim. She scratched the back of her short hair irritably and turned to leave, the air thick with the smell of stale tea. She was a co-founder of Wild Bitch Brewing in Brooklyn. Her battlefield was in the industrial, punk warehouse bars. There, speed and disruption were king. The gears of fate mached with biting irony at the New York Craft Beer Festival, awash in the sweet scent of malt and the bitter tang of hops. Alex's entry was a wildly bold Imperial Stout, smoked phoenix. The inspiration struck while cleaning the garbage strewn alley behind her father's cramped tea hut after Thanksgiving. Staring at a wet, greasy bag of discarded tea dregs beside the dumpster, reeking of cheap charcoal fire and stale tea, a provocative thought flashed. What if she threw this Eastern trash into the symbol of American brawn, an Imperial Stout? She shoved that bag, soaked in grime, smelling of earth and decay, like a flavor bomb, into the violently fermenting black liquid. The judges' palates were blown apart by the bomb. Mike O'Hara, the notoriously acerbic editor of Craft Insider, scrawled frantically on his blind tasting notes. Holy mother of flavor. Unbelievable layers of smoke. Not bacon grease, not Islay peat antiseptic. It's damp concrete, cheap tea leaves, and the primal scent of a back alley bonfire beside a Chinatown dumpster. The finish. God, that rough oolong, like resonance cutting through the port barrel sweetness, tasting of rust and moss. This ain't delicate Oriental Zen. This is a survival roar from the basement. Photos of the notes instantly blew up online. Chinatown trash tea dregs craft brew, smoked phoenix, Songtao Tea Hut, trended locally. When the food vlogger Flavor Riot, sporting neon, green dreadlocks and cyberpunk sleeves, burst through the tea hut's creaky wooden door with a camera crew, Chun Bio Nyan was hunched behind the counter. In the dim light, he was meticulously repairing a fresh crack beside the rivet line on his coarse clay cup, using a small pair of tweezers and a sticky paste of glutinous rice and egg white. Blinding LED lights suddenly flooded the space, the lens thrust almost into the old man's deeply lined, weathered face. Yo, old man Chun. Your punk daughter turned your nasty tea trash into liquid gold. It's fire. Spill the tea. What's the magic in that gunk? The sudden glare and raucous English made Bio Nyan's hand jerk violently. The tweezers scraped harshly against the cup. He squinted his cloudy eyes against the light, his gaze falling on the madly scrolling live comments and the blood-red title on the phone screen, Ghetto Gold, Chinatown Trash to Trophy Brew. Below it was his daughter Alex at the beer festival, her silver-gray hair painfully bright under the flashbulbs, holding a trophy aloft, the words, Smoked Phoenix, emblazoned behind her. Gunk? The wet tea dregs he swept daily into Chinatown garbage trucks, considered life's refuse, were the star of the show? Made into beer? A mixture of humiliated rage, misunderstood sorrow, and a deeper terror of being utterly crushed by the wheels of time seized him. The cup he cherished like life itself slipped from his trembling hand. Clang! It shattered on the concrete floor. Flying shards and the old man's instantly bloodless face were captured clearly by the live stream. Bio Nyan's lips trembled. He spun around violently, shoulders heaving. The stream cut off amidst gasps and chaos. That night, the Songtao Tea Hut's orange door light remained unlit. Alex returned, buzzed with victory yet uneasy deep down, to find a battlefield of wreckage beside the back alley dumpster. Under the dim streetlight, her father's treasured collection, the worn coarse clay cups awaiting repair stacked in the corner, a few chipped blue and white bowls, even the coarse ceramic incense burner used for offerings to Lord Guan, lay shattered on the ground. Mixed with wet garbage, rotting kitchen scraps, and slimy tea dregs, the fragments reflected a cold, broken light. The pungent smell of cheap, stale tea mingled with the sour rot of trash, like a silent dirge. Alex's heart sank. She crouched, her fingers brushing a shard stained with grime, as if touching her father's similarly crushed, humble dignity. Without a word, She silently grabbed a broom and dustpan, sweeping the shattered memories and the damp tea dregs into heavy black garbage bags. The clatter of broken pieces was piercingly loud in the dead alley. 3 months later, Wild Bitch Brewing roared to life in its new Brooklyn digs, a converted industrial space. Huge stainless steel fermentation tanks gleamed with cold silver light. The air hummed with the warm sweetness of mashing malt and the sharp, spicy fragrance of boiling hops. Alex, in a work vest stained with beer, was calibrating a high-speed centrifuge when a special delivery arrived. Not the imported malt they'd ordered, but 3 heavy, grease-stained, grimy orange Home Depot plastic buckets. Their lids were sealed tight with layers of yellow tape. On each bucket, scrawled messily in black marker, were bilingual labels. Cheap Dangkang wet leaves, good smoky. Leftover oolong, maybe mix? Old poor brick strong earth, use caution. Alex froze. She took a deep breath, her fingers trembling almost imperceptibly as she peeled back the tape on one lid's edge. Underneath, stuck to the back of a greasy dim sum menu, was her father's handwriting, shaky yet forceful, 4 traditional Chinese characters. Dregs Are Still Tea. An immense wave of sorrow mixed with scalding heat instantly overwhelmed her defenses. She pictured her father, after the despair of shattered pottery, hunched over, silently scavenging discarded cheap, stale tea leaves and wet dregs from the damp, dark corners of Chinatown alleys, from the greasy bins behind restaurants, from moldy basement nooks, sorting them into these cheapest of containers. This humble, stubborn offering from the bottom weighed 1,000 tons. Alex didn't hesitate. She immediately directed workers to carefully move these buckets, emitting their complex odors, into the brewery's best ventilated raw materials area. She placed them beside the gleaming stainless steel work tables like sacred relics from the streets. Cold industrial order and the raw vitality of Chinatown's damp corners stood in stark, strange opposition. Late at night, the brewery was quiet except for the low orchestral hum of fermentation tanks. Alex walked her rounds alone, passing rows of silent silver giants. Near the raw materials area, her steps halted abruptly. In the dim glow of the safety light, her father, Bo Nyan Chun, was hunched over. He had pressed the side of his face and ear tightly against the cold wall of a massive smoked phoenix fermentation tank in the throes of primary fermentation. His eyes were closed, his age-spotted cheek distorted by the pressure. His expression was one Alex had never seen before, utterly focused, almost ascetic in its devotion. Inside the tank, countless yeast cells were devouring sugars, releasing alcohol and CO2, creating a constant dense hissing like driving rain. Alex held her breath. She saw her father's ear twitch faintly against the tank wall. His chapped lips moved soundlessly. Seconds later, the deep furrows in his brow eased almost imperceptibly. The corner of his mouth lifted in a ghost of a smile. Still eyes closed, in a breath only he could hear, a mix of thick Tahitian dialect and broken English, he murmured. Hear tea leaves breathing, also Chinatown rain falling. In that moment, Alex felt electrocuted. Her father was hearing the violent pulse of yeast life. And what she felt was the cry of the discarded cheap tea remnants from Chinatown's dark, damp corners, the trash, roaring out their own humble yet fiercely resilient declaration of existence within the wild vortex of craft brewing. Cold industrial steel and damp Chinatown tea dregs were conversing across chasms of class in an invisible abyss. Her father, with a lifetime's intuition forged in the underbelly of life, had captured this silent, deafening survival manifesto, but the relentless waves of the craft beer world wait for no one. Big Wave Distribution, the nation's largest distributor, drawn by Smoked Phoenix's grassroots buzz and unique flavor, threw Wild Bitch Brewing a lifeline to the mainstream. A massive first order of 10,000 gallons, stable supply guaranteed within 60 days. The pressure of mass production pressed down like the weight of the Brooklyn Bridge. The biggest bottleneck was the very soul of Smoked Phoenix, the wildly inconsistent, complexly sourced, discarded Chinatown tea dregs. Alex tried to standardize it, buying bulk low, grade tea, brewing it herself, and using the spent leaves. The resulting smoke was either watery and bland, charred and bitter, or carried weird chemical aftertastes. The flavor code, salvaged from the garbage heap, was untamable. Repeated failures filled the brewhouse with the depressing stench of burnt wort and cheap, nasty tea water. After another futile all-nighter, Alex collapsed, exhausted, onto the old sofa in her office. At dawn, dragging legs like lead, she headed back to the raw materials area for one last desperate attempt. Pushing open the heavy soundproof door, a rich, complex, even slightly dirty, familiar scent slammed into her nostrils, the unmistakable Chinatown smoke, cheap charcoal, damp old newspapers, stale dim sum, and that stubborn hint of oolong resonance. She burst into the processing area. The sight before her turned her to stone. Her father, Bo Nyan Chun, wearing his grease-stained old apron, was crouched in front of a massive industrial hot air roaster. Hot air roared from the vent, temperatures nearing 300 degrees Fahrenheit. The old man had no protection, only his bare hands. Those hands, covered in thick calluses, cracked chilblains, and tea stains that wouldn't wash out, were moving with a terrifying blend of practiced skill and street-honed agility. He was manually tossing and turning a huge metal tray piled high with wet, grimy tea dregs mixed with unidentifiable debris. Blasts of scorching air, thick with tea dust and grime, hit his face. His arm muscles strained. His eyes were sharp like a nocturnal predator's, sweat and grime streaked down his temples. His whole body moved with the rhythm of the turning, like a street ritual performed in combat with industrial fire. "Pop! Dangerous!" Alex screamed, lunging for the control panel to shut it down. "Stop!" Chun Bo Nyan didn't turn, his low growl cutting through the roar, his hands moving faster, more forcefully. His voice was hoarse but commanding. "Fire too big. Taste run away. Small fire, slow turn. Like dry fish in sun. You cook like bulldozer." His fingers flew through the searing air and over the scalding dregs, scooping, lifting, scattering with a rhythm that was almost savage. Miraculously, under his touch, that pile of wet, debris-strewn garbage tumbled and contracted in the violent heat, its color deepening to a uniform, rich brown, releasing an increasingly potent, increasingly pure Chinatown smoke aroma, the warmth of cheap charcoal, the bittersweet depth of aged tea, a hint of lingering dampness, and that signature, rusted, iron pipe oolong resonance. The pile of deep, brown dregs finally dumped onto a clean canvas tarp to cool seemed, to Alex, to have completed a tragic, magnificent phoenix, like rebirth from the gutter. The soul was back, but the road to mass production was still riddled with Chinatown-sized potholes. On bottling day, the massive production line rumbled to life like a waking steel dragon. Smoked phoenix, gleaming dark amber black, flowed like an underground river through gleaming pipes and filling machines. The brewhouse buzzed with excited energy. Workers bobbed to the line's rhythm in their headphones. Suddenly, Chun Bo Nyan, who had been silently curled on a stack of cardboard boxes in the corner, sprang up like an old cat startled. He rushed to a row of freshly filled stainless steel kegs bearing the big wave label. Amidst the stunned looks, he snatched the stainless steel tasting cup right out of a young worker's hand. Ignoring the nearby digital screens flashing ABV and IBU numbers, moving with a speed belying his age, he expertly twisted open a sample valve and filled the cup with foamy, fresh, warm beer. No swirling to observe the body, no nosing the aroma. The old man simply tilted his head back and took a huge gulp. Puff! The beer sprayed violently onto the polished stainless steel floor. Bo Nyan coughed violently, his face flushing crimson. He pointed a shaking finger at the row of kegs, yelling with all his might, a mix of Cantonese and broken English. "Sour, too sour, like bad milk in hot alley. Seal the tanks. No good." Wait, the entire brewhouse plunged into dead silence. Every eye fixed on the old man, shock, embarrassment, and undisguised scorn. a Chinatown tea peddler, using the most primitive, unhygienic taste method, condemning the beer as faulty in a modern craft brewery. It was sacrilege against science and procedure. The line supervisor, a heavily tattooed craft beer veteran, strode over, face grim. "Hey, old man, take it easy. Sour note is part of the funky charm. Lab report is clean." "Charm my ass." Bo' waved the empty cup, spittle flying, stubborn fire burning in his cloudy eyes. "This one. Empty. No bone, no Chinatown rain smell. Sour kill the soul. Seal, wait for the bone grow." Every gaze instantly swiveled to Alex. She was the boss, the craft beer trailblazer, the one who decided the fate of the big wave order. On one side, glittering commercial prospects and astronomical penalty fees. On the other, her father's raw, coarse, scientifically baseless yet utterly unequivocal taste judgment. Alex looked at her father's flushed cheeks, at the near fanatic, solitary courage in his eyes defending the soul. She remembered the countless evenings of her childhood, him hunched for 40 years in the dim corner of Songtao Tea Hut, stubbornly sipping that tiny bit of cheap solace from a distant homeland from his coarse clay cup. She remembered his profile, ear pressed to the tank, listening for tea leaves breathing and Chinatown rain. That memory, born deep in her blood, slammed into her chest. She took a deep breath. Under the weight of countless questioning or mocking stares, she strode to the central control console. Without a moment's hesitation, her finger, tipped with silver nail polish, slammed down with decisive force onto the large, bright red emergency stop button. Boom! A shrill, piercing alarm instantly shredded the brewhouse roar. The violently running production line, like a steel beast choked, shrieked with the friction of sudden arrest and froze dead. Bottles and kegs on the conveyor belt became a still life. The entire brewhouse plunged into a suffocating silence, broken only by the frantic whirl of crimson alarm lights, painting every shocked face with an ominous red glow. Alex turned, facing the silent brewhouse, the paralyzed line, and her father's gaze, filled with shock but also a faint glimmer of hope. She grabbed the console microphone. Her voice, amplified through the PA system, was clear, steady, hardened by Brooklyn streets, and carrying the resolve of burning bridges. Production line stopped. All batches, sealed. Time? She paused, her gaze like a torch, locked onto her father, her lips curving into a smile mixed with exhaustion, relief, and profound respect. "We wait for Master Chun's tongue to decide." Her voice, cutting through the alarm's dying wail, fell like hammer blows. "This is Wild Bitch Brewing's first ever." She raised her voice, each syllable crystal clear. "Work stoppage order issued for no bone, no rain smell." In the corner, Chun Bo' tightly pressed, chapped lips loosened almost imperceptibly. A glimmer of moisture, mixed with the alarm light's harsh crimson glare, flickered faintly in his deep-set eyes. His spine, hunched for a lifetime, seemed to straighten, with immense difficulty, by the merest fraction of an inch.